I didn't fall in love with her suddenly. It happened in the quiet moments, when she thought no one was watching. The art studio always felt like a place where time moved slower. The windows were tall, letting in the late autumn light that softened everything it touched. Wooden easels stood like quiet sentries, canvases leaning against them, smudged with half-finished attempts. The air held the faint smell of charcoal and linseed oil, something warm, lived in, unpretentious. I had signed up for the class because I needed something to feel real again. After months of routine and noise and doing what I was supposed to do, I wanted something that didn't demand perfection. Drawing felt like a safe place to fail. That's when I saw her. She was at the front of the room, speaking to another student. 42, maybe 43. Shoulder-length dark hair loosely tied back, strands falling forward whenever she leaned to demonstrate something. She wasn't trying to look impressive, but there was something in the way she carried herself, like someone who has learned how to live, not just survive. She caught me looking and smiled, not a flirtatious smile, just warm, present, seen. When the class began, I tried to follow her instructions, but my hand felt stiff, as if I was trying too hard to draw correctly instead of simply letting myself draw. She noticed, of course she did, and walked toward me with quiet steps that somehow made my heart beat louder. She stood beside me, close enough that I could smell something faintly floral on her skin. Not perfume, something softer, clean, real. "Relax your shoulder," she said gently. Her voice wasn't airy or theatrical like some artists talk. It was grounded, calm, like she didn't need to raise it to be heard. She placed her hand lightly on my shoulder, guiding it lower, and then her other hand slid over mine, adjusting the angle of the pencil between my fingers. The smallest touch and something shifted. Not desire, not lust, something quieter, something that said, "I see you trying. Let yourself be here." Her fingers were warm, steady, familiar in a way that didn't make sense yet. "Better," she murmured. "You don't have to force softness. Just allow it." I nodded, though I don't think she expected an answer. She continued moving through the room, offering advice to others, her presence lingering with me even after she stepped away. I kept drawing, not because I thought I'd create something good, but because she had told me I could. When the class ended, people packed their bags quickly. But I stayed still for a moment, looking at the faint charcoal smudge she had left near the base of my thumb. A trace of her hand, a trace of the moment. As she cleaned the studio, she pushed her hair behind her ear, and that's when I noticed it. Her ring finger had a pale band of skin. Not fresh, not recent, but unmistakable. She caught me noticing just for a second, and she didn't hide it. She just held my gaze, soft and steady, like the beginning of a question neither of us had asked yet. A small spark, quiet, unexpected, and real. The studio emptied slowly that evening. Brushes clinked against glass jars. Chair legs slid softly across the wooden floor. Conversations drifted out the door with the last of the students. It had rained earlier, one of those steady, thoughtful rains that seems to quiet the world instead of drowning it out. The windows were fogged slightly, blurred streetlights glowing like watercolor halos outside. I stayed behind because something in me wasn't ready to step back into the world yet. The studio felt like a place where I could breathe without trying. I rinsed brushes at the deep porcelain sink, watching the water swirl gray and then clear. A small, simple task, but grounding. She stayed too. At first, I thought it was coincidence. She was wiping down tables, organizing pencils, checking supplies, all the things an instructor might do. But it wasn't hurried. And every few moments, our eyes would meet as if we were both aware that neither of us was actually in a rush to leave. We didn't talk at first. The quiet was easy, gentle. Then she walked over and set a clean jar on the tray beside me. "You don't have to help," she said softly. "I know," I replied, but I didn't stop. She didn't ask me to. The rain tapped lightly on the windows, a slow, thoughtful rhythm. Outside, the streetlights reflected in puddles like melted amber. Inside, the studio glowed warm, safe. She leaned against the counter next to me, arms lightly crossed. Not closed off, just holding herself. There was something thoughtful in the way she stood. Something practiced. "It's strange," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. "I used to live in rooms full of noise, full of people needing something from me all the time. I thought that was love, or responsibility, or purpose. I'm still not sure which." I didn't interrupt. I just listened. She looked at the rain for a moment before continuing. "When my marriage ended, everyone expected me to fall apart. But I think I had already been gone long before that. I was just catching up to the truth." Her fingers traced the edge of the counter, slow, thoughtful. "I didn't realize how much of myself I'd given away until I didn't recognize what was left." She wasn't telling me this to impress me, or to earn sympathy. She was simply letting something be true out loud. I nodded, not with pity, but with recognition. "It's hard," I said, "to admit when something isn't home anymore." She turned then, really looked at me, not at my face but into it, like she was searching for the place my words came from. "You understand more than you show," she murmured. Not a compliment, a realization. We stood there in a silence that didn't need to be filled. No flirting, no tension drawn too tight. Just two people sharing the kind of honesty that sneaks up on you. When she finally turned off the lights, the darkness wasn't lonely. It felt like something had begun. Softly, quietly, without needing to be named yet. We walked side by side after class. The evening carrying that late, autumn chill that makes you tuck your hands deeper into your coat pockets. The city was settling down for the night. Traffic thinning, storefront lights dimming. The scent of rain still lingering on the pavement. Street lamps cast long amber shadows, soft and golden. Like everything was being held in a quiet hush. We didn't talk much at first. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because silence felt comfortable. Unforced. I could hear her footsteps beside mine. Steady. Unhurried. Her scarf was wrapped loosely around her neck, and stray pieces of her hair had come free in the damp air, framing her face in this way that felt both elegant and entirely natural. Every so often, our hands would brush, the barest touch, the accidental kind that happens when two people are walking too close. But neither of us stepped away from that closeness. If anything, we both stayed exactly where the space felt right. And it was in those tiny, almost touches where the electricity lived. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just present. Finally, she broke the quiet with a small breath of a laugh. The kind someone lets out when they're thinking too much but deciding to share anyway. "You know," she said, I still forward. "I used to think I had everything figured out." I smiled gently, waiting. "Life," she continued. "Love, who I was supposed to be, what I was supposed to want." She shook her head slightly, almost amused with herself. "But nothing stays the way you think it will. And I guess I'm still learning how to let myself be unfinished." I understood that more than she could have known. We stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. The wind moved her hair across her cheek, and before I could think, I lifted my hand to brush it back. Slow, careful, giving her every chance to step away. She didn't, but she also didn't lean into it. Her eyes lifted to mine. Steady, unguarded, yet thoughtful. Not afraid, not uncertain, just aware. She lowered her gaze for a moment, then spoke, her voice softer than before. "I need you to know something." Her words were slow, intentional. "I'm not someone who does casual. I don't know how to pretend something doesn't matter when it does." My chest tightened, not in fear, but in recognition. Because I wasn't here to play at anything either. "I'm not asking for anything from you," she added, almost gently. "I just needed to say that now, before anything gets confusing." I nodded, not quickly, not reassuringly, just honestly. "I'm not here to treat this like it doesn't matter," I said. My voice came out quiet, but clear. "And I don't want to rush anything. I don't need it to be anything yet. Just real." She took that in. The light changed, but neither of us moved right away. We just stood there, in the soft glow of the street lamps, our feelings quiet but unmistakably shared. No kiss, no dramatic moment, just an understanding. A boundary not to separate us, but to hold what was beginning with care. The night of the fundraiser felt like something out of a different life. The studio had been rearranged for the event. Canvases lined the walls, soft jazz hummed in the background, and warm yellow string lights draped overhead like constellations. People moved through the room with wine glasses and polite laughter, the kind of social performance that looks effortless but feels exhausting if you're paying attention. She was different tonight. Not hiding, she never hid but contained. Composed in a way that looked practiced. Her smile was gracious, her posture effortless, but every now and then I caught it. That flicker in her eyes that said her mind was somewhere else entirely. I stayed near her, not hovering, just near enough. I didn't need to talk. I just wanted to be where she was. When the event finally wound down, when the last compliment had been given and the last handshake exchanged, she exhaled. One of those long breaths that comes from the center of the chest. "Come with me," she said softly. Not an invitation, not a request, just a truth spoken out loud. We walked to her apartment, a short walk, though the world felt remarkably still as we moved through it. She lived in an old building with high ceilings and wooden floors that creaked softly underfoot. The space felt lived in. Books stacked in gentle chaos. Plants leaning toward windows. A few unfinished sketches pinned above her desk. Nothing about it was staged. She kicked off her shoes and, instead of offering wine or making small talk, she filled a kettle and set it on the stove. The quiet between us was easy, familiar now. As we waited, she leaned back against the counter, arms resting at her sides. "No crossed defenses tonight. Most people fill silence," she said quietly. "You don't." I didn't realize how rare that was. I shrugged a little. Some silence feels like presence, not absence. Her eyes lifted to mine, and something softened there. Something she didn't try to hide this time. We sat on the floor instead of the couch. Backs against it, mugs warm in our hands. The lights were low. The world outside was muted. It felt like the night had folded around us instead of passing by. She asked me what I feared losing in life. I answered honestly, not because I was being brave, but because she made truth feel like the most natural thing in the world. Then I asked her the same. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her breathing changed, small, subtle. Her eyes glimmered, just slightly. "Control," she whispered. "And the version of myself I worked so hard to rebuild." Her voice caught, not dramatically, just enough to show it mattered. Without thinking, without planning, I reached out and placed my hand over hers. Not gripping, not asking for anything, just being there. Her fingers curled slowly beneath mine. A quiet acceptance. We didn't hug. We didn't kiss. We didn't move closer. We just held that touch, soft, steady, grounding. In that stillness, something opened between us. Not rushed, not forced, just real, and deeply, unmistakably human. The studio was quiet that afternoon, the kind of quiet where every sound feels gentle, unhurried, intentional. Light poured in through the high windows, soft and golden, dust hanging in the beams like tiny suspended worlds. It smelled faintly of graphite and warm wood, familiar now, comforting. She had invited me to come early, not for a lesson, not officially, just to be there. She was already working when I arrived. Sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair loosely pulled back but clearly losing the battle. A few strands had slipped free, glinting copper in the sunlight. Her focus was calm, steady, almost meditative. When she looked up and saw me, there was no shift of expression, just a softening, as if her face recognized me before her thoughts did. "Come here," she said quietly. There was nothing romantic in the words themselves, but everything lived in the way she said them. I stepped beside her, and she set a sketch pad in front of me. Today we were drawing anatomy, collarbones, shoulders, the expression of posture and vulnerability in the upper body. She stood close, the warmth of her presence brushing against me more than her body ever did. She watched my hand move, slow, deliberate, searching. Then she stepped behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. Something already shifted in the air. Her hand slid gently over mine, guiding the pencil. her fingers warm, sure, precise. Her other hand rested lightly at the center of my back, just between my shoulder blades, steadying my posture. It was nothing dramatic, barely a touch really, but it felt like the whole world narrowed to that single point of contact. "Don't chase the shape," she murmured. "Feel the intention of it." Her voice was close, too close, soft enough that I felt it rather than simply heard it. I swallowed. I didn't trust my voice. She leaned in slightly, her breath near the side of my neck, warm, steady, grounding. The pencil kept moving under our joined hands, but neither of us was paying attention to the drawing anymore. This wasn't the moment we had been walking toward. It was the moment that had been waiting for us. Her lips were near my ear when she spoke. Not touching, not grazing, just there. "If you want me to stop," she whispered, barely audible, "say so." Time didn't freeze, it deepened. I didn't say anything, not because I couldn't, but because stopping wasn't what I wanted. I breathed in, a slow, careful inhale, letting the truth exist between us, unspoken but undeniable. I felt her hesitate, just for a fraction of a heartbeat, and then she let go, not because I had asked her to, but because she understood what restraint meant, because she respected the weight of this moment, because she wasn't someone who rushed toward desire without intention. She stepped back, just enough for the air to settle between us again. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything we didn't say, full of the knowledge that it was no longer possible to pretend nothing was happening, full of the certainty that something real had already begun, gently, deeply, and with care. And neath we met on a quiet morning, the kind that felt like the world was just waking up. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, with tall windows that let in soft light and carried the faint smell of roasted coffee and fresh bread. There was no rush inside, no noise, just the gentle clink of cups and a soft song humming low from hidden speakers. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with her hands wrapped around a warm mug. Her hair was down today, falling softly along her shoulders, a little messy in a way that made her look almost younger, or maybe just unprotected. When she looked up and saw me, there wasn't a smile at first, just a quiet recognition, like she'd been thinking about this moment long before it happened. I sat across from her. No small talk, no filler, just presence. She took a breath, slow, steady, but I could tell she was gathering herself. "I need to say something," she began. Her fingers tightened slightly around her mug. Not a nervous gesture, just honest. "I feel something with you, something real, and it scares me more than I want to admit." I didn't rush to answer. I wanted to give her room. She looked outside for a moment, at people passing by, at leaves blowing across the street. When she spoke again, her voice was even softer. "I worked so hard to rebuild who I am after my marriage ended. I found my footing again, my identity, my peace." She swallowed gently, "And the thought of losing myself again terrifies me." Her vulnerability didn't make her look fragile. It made her luminous. I let her words settle, then offered my own truth, not to counter hers, but to match the courage of it. "I'm afraid too," I admitted. "Not of you, not of us. Just," I searched for the right word, not the poetic one, the true one, "of being temporary in your life, of being something you look back on one day as just a moment, a phase, a passing warmth you outgrew." Her eyes lifted to mine, and there it was again, that steady, searching, deeply human gaze. She reached across the table, slowly, giving me every chance to step back, and rested her hand over mine. Her touch was warm, grounding, familiar in a way nothing should be this early. "You're not temporary," she said, not dramatically, not as reassurance, but as something she believed. I turned my hand over, letting our fingers interlace. The simplest gesture, and yet it felt like a decision being made in the center of the chest. No one in the cafe noticed us, or if they did, we didn't notice them. She exhaled softly, a release of tension that had been sitting in her shoulders for weeks. I felt it in my own body, like something had finally clicked into place. We didn't promise forever. We didn't define anything. We didn't make declarations. We just stood up together, walked outside, and continued down the street, side by side. Our hands still joined, naturally, without hesitation. For the first time, there was no boundary, no line we were afraid to cross. Only a path we were choosing, quietly, honestly, together. Of us was running from it. Winter arrived slowly that year, not with storms or sudden cold, but with a quiet shift in the air. The mornings grew paler, the evenings arrived earlier, and the city moved more softly, as if wrapped in its own thoughts. The studio felt different too, not because anything physical had changed, but because we had. The air between us had a warmth now, a familiarity, a shared knowing. One evening, near closing, the sky was the color of muted lavender, fading into deep blue. The last students filtered out, their voices drifting down the hall until the door shut and the building settled into a gentle, echoing stillness. She stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Her sweater sleeves were pushed up to her elbows, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the table behind her. Her posture was relaxed, not guarded, not contained, just open. I approached her slowly, not because I was uncertain anymore, but because I had learned to move at the pace of this connection. Unhurried, intentional, present. She didn't turn to greet me, but she knew I was there. "You know," she said softly, her voice warm but thoughtful. "I used to think that the only way to protect myself was to stay separate, to keep some distance, to make sure I wasn't too seen." She looked down at her hands. Not ashamed, just reflective. "But you didn't ask me to give anything I wasn't ready to give. You didn't push. You just—" She breathed in, slow. "Stayed." I stepped closer, close enough that my reflection overlapped with hers in the window. Our shoulders almost touched, almost. But we both knew that almost had always been where the quiet electricity lived. "I stayed because I wanted to," I said. No grand statement, just truth. She turned then, and for the first time, I saw something completely unguarded in her eyes. Not longing, not fear. Something deeper. Trust. She reached up and brushed her fingers lightly along my jaw, slow, tender. A touch filled not with desire but with clarity. The kind of touch that says, "I see you. I choose this." No rush. No urgency. Just a moment unfolding exactly as it needed to. I lifted my hand and placed it over hers, gently holding it in place. Her skin was warm against mine. Familiar. Steady. We didn't move into a kiss. We didn't need to. Some love doesn't announce itself loudly. It settles. It roots. It becomes a presence that doesn't require proof. Standing there, in the soft glow of evening, it became clear. We weren't an accident. We weren't a moment of loneliness. We weren't something temporary. We were two people who had lived enough life to recognize when something true had arrived, and to honor it. She leaned her forehead gently against mine. Just that, and exhaled, a soft sigh that felt like release. "We'll take it slow," she whispered. "Together," I answered. No promises of forever. No dramatic declarations. Just a quiet, grounded, deeply certain beginning. The kind that lasts. If this story touched you, or made you feel the quiet power of a connection that grows slowly and deeply, hit the like button and subscribe for more age gap romance stories that explore heart over haste. And tell me in the comments, have you ever felt a moment with someone that changed everything, even without words?